Shalom and good day all, this is Tahilin29 back again for another anime review, and in this anime review I'll be covering Time Patrol Bon Season 2, to which I'll give you a quick synopsis of what the series is about. It says, in this imaginative sci-fi adventure, a student joins a team of time-traveling agents tasked with saving innocent lives during historical events. So with this, I'll be covering Season 2 and also what happens in Season 2, to which I'll give, with the Season 2 episodes, I'll give their title, along with what they give synopsis-wise, and I'll also get to talk about what happened within the particular episode before I move right to the end. After I complete going through all the episodes, I will be giving my afterthoughts in relation to this season and this series. And then last but not least, move into the area of the rating. To which in the ratings, I cover the main characters, supporting characters, the soundtrack, the animation, and last but not least, the area of the story. So starting off with episode 1 for season 2, it is titled The Random Murders. Freshly promoted, Bond takes on the task of saving someone from a neighborhood serial killer. But some problems arise when he becomes the suspect. So in this particular episode, of course, we have Bond being tasked with a mission to save people who are being killed off within the neighborhood, and we learn that a lot of these characters who are dying are also female characters, as they are being preyed upon like someone in the neighborhood. With this, the authorities in a way do sort of get involved, to which he then has to sort of like use his equipment to try to save other people within the neighborhood which he lives in Japan, from preventing from being murdered, and eventually the capturing of course, the murderer, to which eventually happens. He learns that one of the people that he will end up saving is the character of Yumiko, and once she's saved, she also becomes like the next, or his apprentice in the next episode, and to which the next episode is titled The Sacrifice to Shakmul. Eager to be a good mentor, Bond takes Yumiko on her first mission, to which to Chicken Itza in I think that's meant to be 1878. Will Bond's new assistant make a good agent or stir up trouble? So in this, we get to see Bond take his apprentice Yumiko to a time in history, to which when this time in history there's a lot of pagan practices still going place, and it almost feels like the Mayan, or the area of the Mayan history. It doesn't mean it is, but whilst we're here, they try to use the events to save a person by using, number one, the projector, which we get to see used in like the first season, brought again in this season. Whilst we move to the other parts within the story, they do eventually save the key person, to which they're able to return home safely. Next is The Hike Fugitive, episode 3 for season 2. Bond and Yumiko travel to the Kenmon Strait in 1185 Japan, where they must rescue and protect a survivor of the Hike clan from being hunted down. In this, this is almost set up in relation to... It feels a little bit like the Hojo period, to which what happens in the Hojo period, even though it's not quite the Hojo period, they're working on saving the character to which this main character is sort of like a boy connected to a famous clan throughout history. During this particular battle, the character is believed to have died. Whilst this is occurring, they end up disguising themselves so that they aren't discovered. Or one of the characters disguise themselves so that they aren't discovered, being the character of Yumiko, because she's told that she looks very similar to the character from the clan. And whilst this is occurring, she gets captured, whilst giving Bon time to help recover where the main character is. Next is episode 4, which is titled The Sumerian Boy. It's the time period that we're set in is 3019 BC. A Sumerian young boy develops the beginnings of an ancient writing system, but his village is under threat from raiders and needs protection. In this, we learn that the Sumerian boy that they actually have to work on saving, in a way, they have to do something in a way to use natural events from that time to speed things up so that the whole village can be protected from like the raiders that are coming. And with this, we learned that this particular writing script of sorts was developed between, I guess, a girlfriend and a boyfriend of that time, and how that's actually important for this particular time period. And it does end up leading to like a mutual animal friend between the characters to help speed up the events of protecting the village, and to eventually they do end up protecting the village. Whilst we move into episode 5, which is titled The First American, Bon and Yumiko travel over 350,000 years back to desolate landscape in Beringia, to prevent a lone hunter from freezing to death on his trek east. Now, in this particular episode, we have Bon meet someone who's like from overseas at the beginning of the story, and he ends up sort of like doing a bit of a test of sorts, and he realizes, okay, that they've got a bit of a common ancestor. Because we learned that sort of that Bon has a device which is able to detect like the genealogy. Not long after this, they are brought to do a mission, to which they sort of like go to the area of the ancient Americas. We meet the person who they are meant to help survive in this particular set point in history. And no doubt this character looks like the very person who Bon and this foreigner sort of like learn is their common ancestor. And I must admit, that's very clever as to how it's actually done. Moving into episode 6, it's called The Time Patrol Agent's Crime. When a rogue Time Patrol agent murders someone, Bon and Yumiko are determined to stop the crime before it happens and uncover the colleagues' motives. In this, we do come across like another rogue Time Patrol agent, to which he learns that this particular Time Patrol agent is holding a grudge against someone in a certain time period, to which this particular agent, you learn his motives are being done in a way to prevent the death of what would be called the Leviathan, and if anything, it's more like a whale, or to which in this time period we do learn that whales are being hunted, and with the information that they learn from the future, with the help of Yumiko, they are able to relay that, okay, even though he did do what he did, they do learn that this particular whale species sort of like goes into hiding and then comes back out a little bit later on, only to learn that their numbers actually did increase. And that was actually really quite interesting as to how they dealt with this story situation. Next is episode 7, called The Beast Dalb. The crew's next mission takes place in 20,000 years ago in southern France, to where their target is the Cro-Magnon boy, who has been cast out of his village. Now, in this, we learn that this particular boy who's been cast out of his village has been cast out of his village because his father actually used to be like a top hunter, and they ended up sort of like losing their top hunter to a particular beast, and with him being sort of like expelled out of the village, we have Bon and Yumiko doing what they can to sort of like help the situation, but also keep the situation as close to the natural events that occurred in that time, using more so natural things that occurred within that time. So when they do use certain actions, that they're not found out to be sort of like outsiders. Eventually he is brought back into the clan, to which they call bands at that time in the particular story. So it's really interesting. Next is episode 8, which is The Day Troy Fell. After Yumiko gets a promotion, the crew travels to 1229 BC, Troy to save their target. Bond's pride gets in the way when Yumiko comes up with a plan. In this particular event, we do travel to ancient Europe of sorts, or old Europe of sorts, and we get to see some of the things that take place in Greece. And in this mission, they are asked to sort of like save a female character, which I think is a bit of a princess, in this time period. They do eventually work together within the situation, and the end eventually justifies the means as to how things definitely end. Now, moving into episode 9, it's called The Grim Reaper's Horde. Again, this is actually a very interesting rescue mission, as in this particular rescue mission, they are asked to save someone who is Jewish, which I actually thought was really good and really clever. The Grim Reaper's Horde, the crew saves an older man in the 14th century France from the plague. Later, after learning that he's still in danger, they launch another rescue mission. So in this particular story, we have the Grim Reaper's Horde, to which we eventually learn that the Grim Reaper's Horde is basically wording for the Black Plague that spread all across Europe. In this particular story as well, at the beginning, we get to see Bond's mother scared of a mouse, and of course Bond is sort of like, why are you scared of a mouse? Only to learn later on that when the idea of the plague started, it was because of like rodents that also played a part in the spreading of the plague, of the disease throughout Europe and many places including England, wherever else. Due to certain events to which they go to save the older man, they leave because he was sort of like recovered from the disease, that he might have actually been responsible for it. So whilst they were there, they end up sort of like setting a bit of a challenge of sorts, because we learned that the rulership of the day has picked up a fever or something of sorts, to which they issue a challenge and say, okay, let's give it about 3 days. If you're not recovered in that time, you're able to go ahead and execute the people you believe are responsible for this. If you are recovered in this time, the execution must be stopped. So due to the turn of events, of course, the people try to sort of like push ahead of what the ruler had planned, to eventually, not long after that, the ruler in this particular story does actually recover, stopping the execution of the Jewish person who was meant to be rescued in this situation. But jumping into episode 10, we get a very similar situation of sorts, to which it's titled The Wrath of the Gods. After saving Lazarus in AD 79, Bond and Yumiko learn that their target faces a harsher fate, death by gladiator fight, and the wrath of Mount Vesuvius. In this, we learn that the character of Lazarus is actually a Christian, and when you meet this character, they do sort of like come off as sort of like a big, heavy character that's got a bit of weight and strength to him. But even though he's convicted in his belief, or convinced in his belief of being a Christian, he is asked to go forth ahead with a fight later on, to which they do end up doing some small interventions in relation to that. They do learn that the only way to sort of like save Lazarus in this particular event is to sort of like have him die in, where they save his life earlier, they must let him die later on. To which, when they have a look at the history, they realize in this particular history that Lazarus wins against his fight against his opponent, but still Vesuvius blows and causes the destruction which it does. To which they end up doing something to change those events, and Lazarus is sort of like still able to keep to his Christian convictions and die a martyr at the cause, and Vesuvius still goes forth with the destruction it causes. As we jump to episode 11, it's called The Ruins Submerged in Rain. Bond receives terrible news about Agent Ream, so basically his mentor, but must focus on the next mission, rescuing a young man from a sudden flood in 2400 BC at Mohenjo-Daro. So in this particular story, it also corresponds with the next episode. They go out of their way to sort of like help out a particular character, to which they learn this character sort of like deals in the selling of like certain rocks. Whilst they're in this particular time period, Bond notices something out of the ordinary and decides to follow up on it, whilst Yumiko is sort of like there with him in the main century that they're in. To which, in this discovery that he comes across, he finds something that is a dimension ball, or in the present it's sort of like known as a dimension ball, but in the time period to which he's in, He learns that this thing is sort of like given the name of like a type of deity or god. He then goes back to the area of when this particular dimension wall was first discovered, to which he sees that there are people in danger. He goes save the people in danger, and then he decides to follow after this dimension ball. After following it through a certain amount of time, it then sort of like brings us into episode 12, to which is titled Time Patrol Bond. Using everything he's learned as a Time Patrol agent, Bond is determined to stop the Dimension Ball. Will he make it in time before the space-time collapse? Now, in this particular last episode for this season, it's a surprise that we aren't going to end up seeing it. I'm not too sure if we're going to end up seeing like another season, which would be really nice. That's even if the writer of this manga actually did enough for another season, or it could be an anime-only season, to which still honors and respects the rules of the series. So in this, we finally have Bond following where the Dimension Ball is going to eventually where he sees and travels back in time to seeing his mentor Reem end up getting caught in the ball, to which not long after that we have quite a number of events take place, to which in these number of events taking place, like he's following it from time to time to time, to which with the help of Buyo and also Yumiko, they realize that they can sort of like find a way to actually help recover Reem from being killed from the ball, because they do find the inventor of the ball, which is taken in by the Time Patrol crime squad, and we learn where the Dimension Ball ends up exploding is somewhere in Siberia, at the end, like towards the end of the story. Whilst this is occurring, Bond thinks of a way to recover his mentor from the event so that they get to survive the event. And not long after that, she too is also reunited with her mentor later on in the story too. After the turn of events, we sort of like return to seeing Bond back at school, and he's not too sure what his future will be because of the way that he had to intervene in certain events. And whilst waiting on the friend Gala for the return, he starts to get a message on his device, which connects into the Time Patrol. And as he's so anxious and nervous as to not knowing what the result will be, he ends up throwing the device, only for Gala to come out of like his time space to eventually tell Bond what his punishment is. And as he talks about the punishment, he learns that, okay, he's not being punished because of this event was something that was out of his hands. There was the good news that was shared in regards to Reem and also her mentor. And Bond is able to go back to work. And that's where it leaves us at the end. I must admit, this was a really incredible season, and I really enjoyed the change in the costume in this season for Bond. Like seeing his first costume, it was really good, and then getting that change from the original costume to the new costume, I must admit I do sort of quite like the newer costume more than the old, as the way they sort of like lay out the patterns on it, but they're still like keeping to the particular characters. Bond having an apprentice, that was definitely interesting because he's basically now doing the job as what Reem did with him when he was the apprentice, to eventually becoming a Time Patrol agent, but also as a Time Patrol agent, letting his apprentice know that only certain things can be done whilst other things cannot be done. Jumping into the main thing in regards to the series, I actually enjoyed seeing Bon having to learn basically like some things from his apprentice, but also still keeping to things that he was personally taught by his mentor, especially when it comes to the area of saving lives, and that includes the lives of other agents. So moving into the next thing, and that is the area of the rating. First things first, the main characters in the series, or the key main characters in the series, were Bon and also Yumiko. For their performance, I actually enjoyed the voice acting, as to how well it was executed, as to how well this story was adapted from the manga. I got no idea, and I mean I got no idea. I'd love to actually read the manga, considering the creator's name is called Yujiko. So for their performance in this, I give it an 8 out of 10, as I actually quite enjoyed the main characters in this particular series. Now, the area of the supporting characters, which would involve classmates, people throughout history, for this I give a 7.5 out of 10. Next is the area of the soundtrack. Like I said, I've actually come to enjoy this soundtrack, as I mentioned in the one in relation to the last season, or the first season, and I'm actually surprised of how much more I enjoyed it at the end of season 2. So for the soundtrack, I'm going to give it an 8 out of 10. Next is the area of the animation. I really think they did quite a decent job with the animation. I'm going to give it a 7.5 out of 10. And last but not least, the area of the story, to which I'll give it an 8 out of 10. Until then, let's keep it colourful and have yourself an awesome day.